Module 7, The Appeal to Authority. This module covers the history of the English language during the 17th and 18th centuries in England. Let me give you a quick background of the 17th century England. After the restoration of Charles II in 1660, the English society was found to have divided into two camps. The first camp advocated the rationality of scientific discourse. This included new scientists and philosophers. The second camp included religious cults and pseudoscience. This camp believed in practices such as astrology, alchemy, and witchcraft. Radical dissenters and other fanatics were called enthusiasts by writers and scientists from the Royal Society and conservative Anglicans. Supporters of rational science were disturbed by the language of the enthusiasts. Conservative minds were concerned about the public expression and controversial publications. So, the authentic discourse was no longer confined to elite circles. It was now being extensively published in English. The practitioners of natural science condemned the enthusiasts and the old authorities. Educated English people proposed that all power, even over knowledge, must reside in a single political authority. In the 1660s, the Royal Society proposed a solution in which the English language would play a crucial role. Religious moderates, Anglicans, and moderate Puritans argued that the English prose of scientists should be stripped of ornamentation and emotive language. It would be plain, precise, and clear. The style should be non assertive and should emphasize evidence and reasoning. The idea was that an author writing on scientific subjects should convey a sense of his own fallibility. He gives his reasons without passion, discourses without wrangling, and differs without dividing. Essentially, this amounted to a repudiation of classical principles of rhetoric. Should language be geared for dispassionate, rational discourse? This proposal became a credo of the Royal Society, and its principles influenced efforts to design universal languages. All this brought an intense awareness of the importance of language in almost every sphere of politics, society, and culture. John Locke's ideas about language in the Essay of Human Understanding were greatly influenced by the Royal Society. He wished that the qualities desired by scientific prose could be extended to all prose. But the Royal Society could not impose its scheme. It just expected that its members would set an example. The 18th century made all efforts to standardize, refine, and fix the English language. So the discussion of the language takes a new turn. After a long time, attention was turned to the grammar because until then English had no grammar. The grammar was uncodified and unsystematized until then, with much variation even among educated people when they published. The 18th century attempts to codify the English language intended to reduce the language to rule and set up a standard of correct uses, refine it, that is, to remove supposed defects and introduce certain improvements, and fix it permanently in the desired form. John Dryden said, "We have yet no prosodia, not so much as a tolerable dictionary or a grammar. So our language is in a manner barbarous." The lack of a standard resulted in corruptions that were growing up unchecked. It is the subject of frequent lament that for some time the language had been steadily going down, with regret for the good old days of the past. Now, this is the age of Jonathan Swift. Jonathan Swift believed that the golden age of the English language was that of the great Elizabethans. Swift says the period wherein the English tongue received the most improvement, I take to commence with the beginning of Queen Elizabeth's reign, and to conclude that with the Great Rebellion in 42. Swift adds, from the Civil War to this present time, I am apt to doubt whether the corruptions in our language have not at least equaled the refinements of it. Just to remind you here, this Jonathan Swift is the same person who wrote the famous work Gulliver's Travels, a satirical fantasy of the time, very widely read in schools and even made into cartoons and Hollywood movies. Swift had a conservative view about language. His conservative ideas were based on a set of political, religious, and linguistic opinions. Swift believed in the authority of church and state. He would have preferred that the 17th century political, commercial, and scientific revolutions had never happened. However, he understood the merits of a plain English style, so long as it was not polluted by crude and careless usages. Swift's anger has to do with certain words popular among young people of fashion. They had even invaded the pulpit. He said, in his words, young preachers fresh from the universities use all the modern terms of art, sham, banter, mob, bubble, bully, cutting, shuffling, and palming, all which, and many more of the type. As I have heard them often in the pulpit, so I have read them in some of those sermons that have made most noise of late. He opposed the tendency to contract verbs like drugged, disturbed, rebuked, fledged. He said that the English language was already overstocked with monosyllables. Dictionaries had the most significant role in standardizing, authenticating, expanding, and establishing the English language. The first English dictionaries were bilingual, Latin English, and covered mainly the legal vocabulary. Monolingual English dictionaries, which means words defined in English, arrived late. In our previous module, we covered the chronology of the earliest English dictionaries. Just to remind you all, Sir Thomas Elyot published his Word Book in 1538. It was a Latin English dictionary dedicated to Henry VIII. In 1582, Richard Mulcaster published the Elementary. It was a collection of about 8,000 words at a time when English spelling was without any certain direction. It helped the spelling reform movement of the time. After that, Robert Cowdery's Alphabetical appeared in 1604. It is a small book of 130 pages and around 2,500 entries. It focuses especially on uncommon words from Latin and Greek. The definitions are brief, sometimes just a single word, and not always very accurate. The most authentic material as far as the dictionaries is that of Dr. Johnson's A Dictionary of the English Language. It came in 2 volumes. It surpassed all other dictionaries published thus far. It was published in 1755. It was much bigger in size and also in precision of definitions. The dictionary was widely used far into the 20th century. The dictionary had over 2,300 pages with words and illustrations. The dictionary included the history of the English language, description of grammatical categories, and the list of over 42,000 entries and 140,000 definitions. Words came from every field of knowledge and all walks of life: literature, business, industry, technology, politics, administration, and many more. The entries were collected from the best conversation of contemporary London and the writings of published authors of the time. With the dictionaries, the English language became systematized, with the spellings authenticated and grammatical rules defined and categorized according to their uses. So, Dr. Johnson's dictionary has a huge contribution to the English language.